Busy morning at Tisarana. We have accompanying our sunny day. We have a session going on in the little sala as well, where I think Venerable Amarasiri is leading a group of people who have coming by. Usually we're getting 10 or 20 people on these Sunday mornings. So it's very rewarding, very nice to see the place opening up in this way. And here we are. Today I talk about something that comes up a lot in discussions of meditation and in the suttas, in the Buddha's discourses, and which is actually very relevant to our lives every day, and that is the list of 5 hindrances. So these are qualities of heart and mind which intrude on our good intentions, which intrude on our clarity of the heart and mind. They offer resistance. They preclude our natural goodness from emerging. They stand in the way. So it's a list, and I guess many of my talks sort of begin with lists, or at least make reference to them, because that is one dimension of the Dhamma that we kind of encounter when we're looking at suttas, when we're reading them, and hearing Dhamma discourses as well. It's another one of those lists that is handy to attach to your fridge. Earlier, just a few days ago, last week, I guess, I was invited into a Sri Lankan temple in Ottawa, and I introduced them to one of my favorite themes, which is fridge magnets. And pretty sure they had never heard this before, but the idea of putting down lists of just, once in a while, short list, sticking it on your fridge and reminding yourselves every day as you pass your fridge, as you're cooking, as you're going this way and that, just reminding yourself of wholesome dhammas, words which relate, which link up with one another, and which kind of contain within themselves, are kind of pregnant with meaning, with truth, with the power of liberation, basically. It's not a small matter, and it is not a difficult way to kind of keep these things being revived in one's mind, one's consciousness, one's heart. So this is another one of these lists, and probably most of you, many of you, all of you will have heard these before. We all recognize, I think, that we have particular temperaments, maybe particular characters. All human beings who are unawakened have tendencies have tendencies towards certain mistakes, making certain mistakes about reality, and those are made in Buddhist terms in the form of various forms of delusion. Greed, hatred, and delusion in particular. So we have those 3 things to account for. So the 5 hindrances are along these lines, and are useful to keep in mind. And the way that I'm going to be talking about them this morning is in reference to the similes which the Buddha gives for them. So the first one, I'll just quickly the list: covetousness. So desire, you might say, covetousness, wanting things. Ill will, sloth, and torpor. These are kind of, I'm not always sure how some of these terms kind of continue in our lexicon. This is sort of early 20th century, late 19th century language, sloth and torpor. So you might say laziness, sluggishness in the body and the mind. Sometimes the body, as we know, can be very heavy and we just can't get it going. And sometimes it's the mind itself, which is obviously, there's this tendency not to put our energies into this or that, which might be actually very useful on any given day. So sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse. Restlessness and remorse. So this is sort of the opposite of sloth and torpor. That is, there is a kind of agitation. And again, restlessness could be largely from the body. The energies of the body are just, we want to get up and move, that kind of thing. But of course, the mind can also be restless, looking for things to do here and there and everywhere. And then remorse would be also a form of restlessness, but we can't settle the mind in any particular place because there's a sense of something that was poorly done, that was maybe undone, improperly done, or not at all done, that should have been done. And we have some remorse over this. Maybe we said something, maybe we didn't conduct ourselves in a way which really we're very proud of. So the mind returns to this. And this also is kind of agitating. And finally, doubt. And here, usually we distinguish doubt. We distinguish forms of doubt. You don't know how to get, who is it? Yogi Berra, who said to get to his house, you drive to the T and then oh heck, now I've forgotten. It's just a beautiful one of those lovely. I've forgotten it. Golly, there's my Yogi Berra trivia gone for the day. Sorry about that. But yeah, we don't know how to get somewhere, and that's a legitimate form of doubt. I know I'm in Calgary. I know I need to go to the Northwest, and I've forgotten which street I take. This is doubt. This is an understandable form of doubt. The doubt here we're referring to is a skeptical doubt. This kind of this quality which plagues the mind sometimes. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I do it? Should I not do it? We have some sort of moral compunction, or we think better of it, and then we return to it. We're sort of vacillating on something which actually involves perhaps some moral situation, or some state of affairs, some way of engaging, some way of going forward. We doubt something related to the practice, for instance. So covetousness, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, restlessness and worry, and doubt. Okay, so I sometimes, this sometimes comes to mind as a kind of theme for me, which is the value of imagination in our practice. I don't think it's necessarily something which is spelled out in clear language in the Dhamma necessarily, but I just suggest we sometimes give it some attention. Sorry, my voice is a little weak today. Imagination. Imagination works very well, for instance, in the use of simile, because the Buddha is regarded as a true master of simile. He was his genius, in a sense, was fully formed and expressed through his teaching, and his teaching, of course, issued from the wisdom of his awakening. But it was expressed in various terms, including in his very skillful use of simile. So the similes then for these five hindrances. Covetousness. So what is that? Yeah, put yourself in a state of covetousness, wanting something, really wanting something. When you're in a state of want, you're in a state of lack. You're incomplete without having something, right? This morning I woke up and I was fine. And then I remembered where I sort of came back to this theme of really needing a new pair of running shoes or something. And then there's this one pair that's really nice because they go with my pants, or I mean, I'm just making this up, of course, but and they cost a certain amount and they're a little too expensive, but they're really nice. And so there's a sort of fixation on something. There's a state of lack, and that state of lack has a particular character, has a particular shape, you might say. Yeah, as in a particular pair of running shoes of the right size. So the simile for this that the Buddha gives is debt. You're in a state of debt. The state of lack is being in a state of debt. Okay. So, show of hands, but has anyone here not been in debt before? I'm guessing many of you, I'm sure many of you have had or still have a mortgage to pay off. Yeah. And have you ever thought of what it will be like when you get some sort of paper from your bank saying your debt is completely discharged? You don't know it's a thing. You actually own your house now, or your condo, or whatever it is. So we're, in one sense, we're talking about things that get in the way of clarity and meditation. But of course, the five hindrances relate to the whole of life. Okay. What is it like to be in debt? What is it like to be free of debt? Yeah. So we use our mind, we use our imagination in a, I'm suggesting a skillful way, just to kind of weigh these options. Yeah. And part of a weighing of that option is by understanding the character, the quality, the texture of the hindrance itself clearly. Partly so that when it arises in meditation, for instance, or when it arises in life in general, when you're sitting at a stoplight or whatever, part of it is so that when it does arise, you've given it a name, you've contemplated it, you've reflected upon it often enough that it has a particular character. There you are. As Lumpur Sameda would say, covetousness looks like this. Covetousness is like this. Okay? That's what this exercise I'm suggesting is about. But this is why imagination is valuable, because the more we kind of ponder something, when we're not in a state of, when we're not sort of being driven by these five hindrances, but when we're in some sort of state of clarity, we sitting in an easy chair and just going through the list and pondering each in turn. As I say, to get a sense of the character of these things. What does it feel like to be in debt? And some forms of debt, of course, I'm sure for people, well, when you first take on a mortgage and then 6 months later, you're told that your job is in jeopardy. Do you have, how much extra money do you have in the bank that can look over the shortfall for a few months while you look for a new job, maybe a few weeks or months? So a sense of this is a real concern. This is a vital concern in our economic livelihood. So debt is no trivial matter. We are economic beings to some extent, one extent or another. So to be free of debt, then, that is a real type of freedom. You can sense the relief, the ease that provides. Maybe it's because you have enough money in the bank or whatever, but you need something. It fulfills some important lack in the household or whatever, a new winter coat or something. but you have sufficient funds to purchase it, and you get it. So it's not you don't there's not a sense of covetousness, of wanting and being at a distance from it, being unable to attain it. But in any case, having a debt discharge, that is a feeling of relieving the sense of covetousness. Ill will. Well, the simile for ill will is a person is stricken with a disease. You've got a fever, or your guts are churning. You've got some sort of food poisoning. You've got a fever. You're dizzy. You're hot. And you can't shake it. And you can't walk into the next room and be without fever, can you? You're carrying it around. It comprises your body to a large extent. So ill will, I expect everyone has been angry at someone about something they've said, something they've done, something they've not done. Words exchanged, so forth. We all know what the territory looks like. But the question here is, and here using the powers of reflection, of memory, of imagination, what does it feel like? What is the texture of the ill will? Where does it situate? Where does it locate? And this is very much a bodily thing, isn't it? You might feel it in the heart, in the belly, maybe. Quite often, people will experience and will speak about almost a kind of fever. It heats up the body. There's all this energy contained, and it can't be maybe expressed, or maybe it is expressed, and that just gets you into further difficulty, owing to remorse, which we'll come to later. But ill will is not an easy place to be. Frustration, anger, resentment. These are not easy places to live in the world. And as I say, the simile is a disease, is sickness. It's a burden, but which is carried by the body in a particular form. It has a texture, a temperature, whatever you. Okay, so hopefully all of you are comfortable and healthy here. I'm sure everyone here has been sick from time to time, and we know what it looks when we know what it feels like. For instance, to feel, when the fever breaks, and oh, that's good. You're maybe still kind of weak and whatnot, but you know that the worst is past and that health is sort of returning. Or when you can once again look at food without being kind of sick, being sort of sickened by the sight and the smell of it, the thought of putting it in your mouth. So that sense of this is a different kind of burden, but it also carries with it the sense of being encumbered, being burdened, and then having this relief. A good friend of mine, about a year ago, I think she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and it had been at a lower state for a while, and then that was the news she got. So she's into natural health remedies and whatnot, and really gave herself to the task of moderating her diet and taking some medicines which she felt would be useful. And lo and behold, in this late December, early January, or actually earlier in the fall, the oncologist, after a blood test, showed that it was stage 2, so it had reduced considerably. And then early in the new year, he reported back to her in disbelief, basically. He actually, I think, ran the test either 3 or 4 times because he didn't believe it at first, but she was free of it. So, she has kids and a husband and so forth. And so you can imagine the relief owing to that diagnosis. Many of us won't maybe experience it in quite in those extreme terms, but still, we've all had our share of sickness. Just a bad cold, and you can't talk properly, and you're blowing your nose all the time, and it impedes your ability to do things. You were invited out to a gathering, and you have to cancel, et cetera, et cetera. Stop going to work for a few days, and so forth. Colds can be a real nuisance. And then things just dry up. You're not blowing your nose anymore, and your throat's cleared up, and you feel more energy. So here again, there's a sense of being unburdened, disencumbered by an unwholesome state. Okay, now the next one, the third one, sloth and torpor. Heaviness, lethargy, laziness. Now, some people that we might know just seem to be endowed with a surplus of energy, ambition, and they're always doing things and that. But most of us, I expect, from time to time, just don't feel like doing anything. There are things that we need to do, but we don't. We put them off. We resist. We kind of, we put the brakes on. It's like you've got one pedal on the accelerator, but you still got your brake on, or you've got it in. For those of you who still have standard shifts, it's in second gear instead of fourth, and it's all, it's not working properly. So sloth and torpor, laziness. Of course, there is, this raises its head, of course, in practice, and the Buddha spoke about all of these things in very practical terms related to the Eightfold Path. All of these are very pertinent, as we know, to the process of living through practicing the Eightfold Path. But in daily life too, we all recognize, the laundry should be done, and just can't you get yourself off a chair, or can't get out of bed, or whatever. Not for any particular health reason at all, but just don't feel like it right now. Want to curl up and continue sleeping or what have you. And sometimes, and maybe this will apply to some and not to others, but sometimes there's something that you really know you should be doing, something that you should be applying your mind to. This isn't always just physical in its nature. It isn't about driving across town to do thus and such. It might just be, I've got to start thinking about how to organize my thoughts around something I need to do, or I need to consider something, or I need to go through the household budget again and really be clear about where the money is going, or something like that. And you just don't do it. And then, when something is due, it sort of bites you. It bites you in the foot because it was undone, and you could have done it, and there's no particular reason at all that you didn't, but you just didn't because you didn't feel like it. So there's a sense of laziness here, heaviness. And the simile here is being in prison. And the prison can be of the mind, or it can be a prison of the body too. The body is sluggish. You can't get up off the chair, it seems. And even when you do, it's so hard to motivate yourself to get doing this and such. This is like being in a prison. You're bound by 4 walls. You can't get out the door. You have no freedom. you're constrained in some serious sort of way, and it's so frustrating. Now, those of you who have read maybe some of the accounts by forest monks of their training and what goes on in forest monasteries, the bell rings at 3 a.m. and they start the morning puja at 3:30, and the day kind of goes like that, and usually there's a period, say in the early afternoon, for catching up on a bit more rest, and then you've got sweeping and bathing and tea time and evening puja, and always the Kruba, the senior, the Kruba Ajahn, the senior teaching monk, who has been through this himself for decades. He's encouraging that we put out more effort. Put out more effort. Don't give in to the desire, and there is a very strong desire to sleep, to lay down, to recline, and just sleep. So much so that one of the allowable, what are called dutangas, is not lying down to sleep. So some people will do this for a few days, or sometimes a very diligent monk might determine to do it over a rains retreat, for instance. So they don't lie down to sleep. Maybe they find a wall, they just lean against the wall and sleep, but they're always in the seated posture. In some tradition, I've heard of some monks. You might have. This is. Yeah, there's I think a Burmese monk. There was some teachings of his translated a number of years ago, and apparently he made the determination at some point in his monastic career, and he did not lie down for the rest of his life. And that includes, imagine being sick. So back to previous simile. Imagine being sick and not lying down. Imagine having a fever and not lying down. So that would take some serious determination. And people who knew him in his later years said that he was so deeply at peace, and there was just this sort of calm, peaceful energy exuding from him all the time. So probably that is a practice, and that is the result in part of his diligence in this particular regard. Anyway, for most of us, most of the time, or most of us all of the time, that will not apply. But we know what it's like sometimes to work a little extra hard to get something done, and then feel the benefit of just having, work through something, work through that sort of thought, oh, it'd be nice to sit down, or I'd like to go to bed a little early tonight, or whatever, but actually just carried on and gotten something done. And it's very rewarding. And you might even say there's a sense of a feeling maybe of self-respect that comes out of that, knowing that you can do something when it seemed a little bit difficult, or when you at one time would not have done it, when you wouldn't have normally done it in the past, but now this time you've done it, and doesn't that feel good? So sloth and torpor, this kind of sluggishness, laziness, this is the feeling here. The feeling we're to imagine, to bring to mind, is being in a prison, being locked up, being chained, or being constrained, or being unable to just get out and move and live a life, a healthy human life. The next one, restlessness and remorse. So this is the opposite, where there is an abundance of energy, and it's energy which is not particularly focused. You just really can't sit still. Maybe you just got to get up and do something. And quite often, the tasks that one is seemingly undertaking at such a time, they don't really get done that well, because the mind is, you just start one thing and then you're thinking about maybe doing something else. So restlessness is not a healthy place. Is not a healthy place to live. And I imagine everybody here has felt this at times as well. Some of it, I think, for many of us, will relate to this notion of doubt, which will come later. That is, you get started on one thing, but then maybe I should be doing something else, and you trot over and begin some other task, or you begin thinking about something else in a kind of haphazard way. So that's the restless element, and again, it can seem to uh, come out of the body because the body can be just kind of energized and kind of shaking or with some kind of vibrating, and it can also be seemingly more mental in character. Mind just doesn't want to stay put in any particular place. Remorse, as I've said, it has a different kind of quality. You might say it is restlessness owing to some kind of fissure in one's ethical being, say. So the mind keeps going back to something which you feel regret over. You can't sort of move on from that. You can't leave it because the mind keeps going there. So you've done something, you said something, maybe you've even entertained a kind of line of reasoning, a line of thinking, which really wasn't healthy, wasn't wholesome, was not productive in any kind of way, and you feel badly about this, but you can't move on from there to kind of revitalize the mental stream because the mind won't sort of leave that place. And here the simile is slavery. So a slave can move about. They have things to do and whatnot. And in fact, they can't sit still because their liberty is not their own. Their liberty is not their own. So even when they're sleeping, somebody can come, wake them up rudely and tell them to get doing something. So you can't just sit still. You're having a bite to eat, and you know that at any moment you could be interrupted. Get up and go do this or that. You're sick, maybe. Doesn't matter. Somebody will maybe wake you up, or somebody rings a loud bell to get back to work. Even though you're sick, you can't. So again, using the imagination, and thankfully, probably I don't think any of us have actually endured any form of actual slavery, but still we know enough about that condition to understand that these kinds of things would be possible. The imagination can breathe some life into this, and our bodies aren't ours in a sense, yeah. You might not be capable of some things, but still you're being told you have to lift these weights, or you have to continue doing some menial task even when you're just worn completely out. So here again, what would it be like to have the condition, the change removed, to have your condition of slavery in some formal sense be rescinded? You being told you are free to go. You can go in any direction you choose, and you're free to do whatever you like. That's the kind of relief which takes its particular form in this particular case. So again, not at all a trivial thing. All of these hindrances taken to their extreme, you might say, are real difficulties in life. They are deep and abiding encumbrances on our liberty, on our clarity, on freedom. And the last one, doubt, or what's sometimes just defined as skeptical doubt. Yeah. The mind just won't act in a particular, won't. Um, okay, again, we know what it's like not to know the directions to get somewhere. Okay, and so there's doubt there. Maybe no one doubts directions anymore because you just plug it into your GPS on your car, I guess. But still, I think we've all experienced wondering if you've taken the right road off to the campsite. You know, it's the middle of the night, practically. You're late getting to some camping area, and you're wondering if you've taken the right track or not. And you know, these roads maybe aren't on GPS. Google hasn't quite entered them into its vast and benign program. So being in a state of doubt, in one sense, is a natural sort of thing. But here we're talking about another sort of thing. You're given good teachings, maybe, and then something sort of niggles at you. Oh, but should I do that? Oh, maybe they were just telling me that for their own gain, or oh, I don't know if I could do that. Or so we our experience is incited by a kind of, it's a type of restlessness, I would say, but it has this particular character of not being able to carry through with something because of some sort of intellectual concern, some quasi intellectual quibble. The simile for this one is again, I think, is very easy to imagine. And the simile is a rich person is going across a desert. So he or she has got all his wealth, with his camel or his horse or his whatever, and he's making a hazardous trek across a desert. And you get halfway across, and there are all kinds of things to worry about. Do I have enough water to get the rest of the way? And if you didn't, and if you're halfway across, it wouldn't matter much, would it? Am I going, maybe there have been a few crisscrossing roads and that you think you're doing the right thing, but maybe you took the wrong way. Maybe I should have turned left at that last palm tree, whatever it was. But it's that kind of existential concern. Oh, can I go forward? Should I go to the left? Should I go right? You can imagine being in that kind of state. Apparently, this word we have, bewilderment. Bewilderment. There was a type of I don't know whether it was a type of execution or a type of punishment. How would we describe it? That apparently was used at a certain time in Europe, maybe in the Black Forest or something like that. But they would lead someone out into the middle of a huge forest and let them go. And apparently it was the kind of thing that could often drive a person mad, because they just wouldn't know which way to go. And you could end up going in circles. You recognize you've actually been. So all of that effort, the last few hours, and you've been scraped up and you've fallen and you're getting hungry and thirsty, and now you're back where you were before, and so forth. And so this is apparently the classical origin, etymology, you might say, for this word bewilderment. So doubt can take extreme forms, even to that extent. Just don't know. Should I go left? Should I go right? Should I even take another step forward? What can I do here? Okay, but the person just continues, and finally in the distance sees an oasis, a bit of green, finally cropping up in the desert and makes his way closer and closer, and can start to smell even the water, the richness, the resources of that area. And then you're getting closer, and there are the fig trees or whatever they have in oases. And finally, you're there. You're safe. You've arrived safely with no diminishment of your resources. So all of your wealth is still on the back of your camel or what have you. You're still alive and well enough. And from this, let's say, from this oasis, you now know how to get to the next one, and actually you're well on your way home, or maybe you've arrived home. Doesn't matter how you work it out in your simile. But that's how in a sense, that's how far doubt can take us, and what the removal of that doubt, what its eradication, what its easing could look like, could feel like in the final analysis. So these hindrances then are to be taken seriously, and in extremis they are as serious as what the Buddha is relating to here in terms of these similes. They get in the way. They obstruct our own goodness. They obstruct our own development. They obstruct the development of our goodness. In other words, they stop us, slow us down, but they stop or slow us on the path, the Eightfold Path. They stop us from understanding, from practicing. They confuse us. They move us onto different paths which are not at all useful, valuable for us. But if we, as I keep saying, if we use our imagination and just ponder these things for a time, and reflect on the character of these five hindrances. What do they look like? What do they feel like? Where do they, what circumstances in my life would they quite often arise in? What kinds of things do I need to look out for? What are the early signs maybe of their arising? Things like that. We come to understand them more clearly, and therefore head off the difficulties that they bring much more early. And in a way, one way to begin is just thinking about Lumpur Samedo. Covetousness looks like this. Doubt looks like this. Just some sort of simple axiom eventually, when we really come to understand them, know what they look like and feel like, etc. And then we have this assurance by the Buddha that by actually actively working against them, seeing them clearly, and applying the antidote, because of course there are antidotes to covetousness. There are antidotes to ill will. We've chanted the loving kindness sutta at the beginning of our session, and this would be a way of mitigating, of easing a sense of ill will, reminding ourselves of the benefits of a healthy and open heart, for example. So we have practices to work against these. That's what the Buddha is so often describing in the various suttas. So, yeah, I would just suggest this is another of these useful lists, and it might it might appeal to you particularly right now. Take it seriously and work with it. Use it, use it as a reflective practice. So I'll close with my best wishes. And we have time for questions, if any of you have any.
Handamayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karang Dadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami.
you, Ajahn Pavaro, for the talk. I apologize, but I made a slight mistake. We were supposed to start with guided meditation before the talk. So it kind of
I thought so.
But maybe, Ajahn Pavaro, if there are any questions, maybe, we could, shall we address the questions first before you lead us in
Yeah,
meditation?
let's do that, and then we can finish off with a period of meditation. And you'll be meditating, I think, afterwards. Is that right, or no?
That's right, Ajahn. We would be meditating afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, let's. Since I've been talking, and might have stimulated some questions for some of you.
If anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hands. We'll help you unmute. Peter?
Thank you for your talk. So much of it is recognizable. We find I find these showing up so much in our lives, so many examples. I was just wondering, it occurred to me that is it possible that some of these in more extreme forms could lead to mental illness?
Sure, I think so. Yeah. If they're not, for whatever reason, if they aren't recognized, and if there are no healthy outlets in life, just there is a value to having some responsibilities that obviously just need to be attended to. You got a job, you do, that does more or less useful things. You can see the results of those in your day. You put your energy into it. You learn through giving your energy to something, and some sort of product is developed, or you maybe live in a relationship, so you have somebody that you're working against, like rocks in a barrel that are being tumbled, and smoothed and whatnot. So some of your own kind of excessive tendencies are just knocked off because you care about some other person, and the body is relatively healthy. So just normally kind of giving it healthy exercise, giving it healthy avenues for expression. So in what we would call a normal, healthy life, I guess. And I'm not here describing any particular exalted spiritual state. It's just a normal, healthy human being who has some friendships and has people in his life or her life who they can trust, and does some useful things that support a family or supports himself and other people, and also they have a sense of a bit of pride in what they do, and their body works well enough that they enjoy getting on a bicycle or just using it, having walks and so forth. All of these things just are normal, I guess, expressions of a relatively healthy person. And take a few of those away, they can't trust anybody, and maybe for understandable reasons in their early life, perhaps, or their body is extremely maladapted for any kind of activity. Maybe there's an extreme handicap, or there's some sort of reason that normal work, for instance, normal physical activity is impossible or nearly impossible. Or there are many reasons, as I think we all know, for extremes of ignorance and how they get expressed in a life. So yes, I think for any of these things, we see if you think of news stories or seeing people interviewed on television because of this or that problem, or perhaps you watched YouTube videos of psychologists speaking about particular types of affliction. It's easy, I think, to spot any of these hindrances in those, and to see the similes at work in a very, very pronounced degree. It's just heartbreaking to consider a life which, for instance, in which there's not a single person that one feels that they can trust, say. Just as an example. So yeah, I think so. Yeah. And if it gets to a very extreme point, I think then we need quite often the assistance of skilled professionals. For instance, sometimes I guess some of the forms of medicine are necessary and very, very useful from what I'm told. So I'm not at all an expert in these matters, but I believe that at least if these things are caught early, for instance, that there are practices that we kind of understand to some degree and engaging to various degrees, that these practices will mitigate, will ease the situation. Some self-discipline. And actually, just as an example, I mean, it's understandable why this or that person may hate someone in their life, a parent, or some early experiences in life are just extremely difficult to even imagine. So it's understandable why, for instance, ill will would be present, or confusion maybe would be present. It's understandable. And maybe these practices that we're engaged in wouldn't quite work in this particular case, but that situation will be bound to get more difficult if they feel that they are always that it is legitimate. It's legitimate that this is who I am. So the problem of identifying with any particular hindrance is just compounded and compounded. It becomes part of who they are, part of how they see themselves, and there's nothing wrong with me, nothing I need to attend to. It's you that don't see things properly, and so forth. So people can also dig themselves in deeper, I think, and I've certainly seen this from time to time in my own life, and I'm sure it's not so unusual for people to recognize. So yeah, I mean, that's a very important, good observation, Peter, and no easy way through it, but this practice does have a power to it. We ought not to underestimate the power of the Buddha's instructions and the power of wisdom when it's taken very seriously, and a sense again of, the Buddha said, two things arise from suffering, because what we're describing, after all, is suffering. Yeah, one way or another, it's just suffering. Two things arise from it. One is confusion, so you just get further confused, maybe by identifying with what it is you're feeling. Yes, the world is a rotten place, and everybody is out to get me, whatever. So it can lead to just more confusion, or it can lead to so doubt or whatever, confusion, or it can lead to search. And it may be, and probably everybody here has experienced times when there's just this confusion, this suffering around some issue, and and then it brings us back. Wait, what can I do about this? Or what would the Buddha have to say about this? Or what does my best friend tell me when I get like this? What does she try to remind me of again, that I'm actually a good person and I need to begin to do this or that? So the notion of faith that there are practices, that there are insights which actually resolve these deep existential predicaments, and that we're worth, it's worth pursuing them. We're worth it, and the practices themselves are valuable. So there's a beautiful, you probably all know of dependent origination, that list of 12 conditions that give rise to samsara, you could say, the ongoing, situation, the relationship between ignorance and birth and death. And in one of those formulations, which appears in the Samyutta Nikaya, instead of 12, you end up with 24. And in the middle, you have suffering. And then the next one is faith. And then this conditional wheel begins, it turns anew in a wholesome way. So faith eventually ends up with the clear understanding of the kind of final removal of all suffering and the emergence of awakening in a human life. So that's how the same causal nexus can take a sharp turn, beginning with faith, just having a sense of confidence or trust in the beauty of teachings of this kind, in the beauty of the human the beauty of the human potential to awaken. It's a marvelous thing, after all. Is there anything better?
Thank you.
Rajan, if I may say, I found one of the examples that you gave for doubt very interesting. You said that the fact that sometimes we question our own ability to do certain things is a form of doubt. And I found it very interesting, because lately there have been instances where these kind of thoughts and questions have arisen in my mind as well. So just wanted to share that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Yeah, we all know that Buddhism places this question mark around what the self is and who the self is and what it thinks it is, and identification of all these things. But yeah, just using colloquial language and speaking about self-doubt is, I think, understandable to all of us. And it's one of the things that keeps us from continuing practice sometimes. We just doubt ourselves. We doubt our capacities to actually fully engage in this. And it's a theme that I come to often, because I think nobody that I know who's worked with this path for a few years, a few decades maybe, hasn't encountered periods of, is it working? Have I gotten anywhere yet? That kind of question, as if we could measure these things. And we're looking for experiences, and the experience of this and that and the next thing. It's quite easy to get caught in this. And if that snowballs, then it can be kind of serious. It can stop us from pursuing these forms of teaching and practices, for example. And also it stops us from regarding ourselves in a healthy and fulsome way, in a generous enough way. So it's another thing to be attentive to. It's just mindfulness. There's nothing that really beats it, for recognizing something as it is, for seeing the reality of something. And then being attuned to that. Oh, this is emerging, so I should do this because it'll help to mitigate that. It will provide an antidote to that thing. Or this is arising, and isn't that useful? What can I do to further develop it? You know, so we need mindfulness for all of these things. We need to recognize where we are at any one time.
Shannon has a question.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi. Thank you so much for your teachings, and this list is really interesting. I guess, and as you go through it, of course, I'm like, yep, that one. Yep. Yeah. But I guess I kind of am like met with this paradox where, you know, there's something about like the like what are the similes, like when I'm ill will, you know, when I'm angry at someone, if it's like being sick, like when I'm in that condition, I just want to not have ill will, or I want to not be sick, you know, or like if being lazy is like being in prison, like I want to be free, and it's covetous, right, to want. And it makes me, and so I guess my question is how do you work with these hindrances without succumbing to them at the same time? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, because are you asking about the place of desire in all of this?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like you know, like I want to not be hindered,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that feels like a hindrance in and of itself.
Yeah, that's, I think everybody, you know, show of hands maybe, but I think everybody has encountered that apparent kind of dilemma. I would, and I think it's largely a linguistic or entirely a linguistic one. We recognize the value of different desires and the valuelessness of many desires, of course. So frame it in this way. You know, I desire a piece of chocolate cake. I desire this. You know, I want more of this and that and the next thing, as opposed to I aspire to this. Yeah. So desire versus aspiration, that might be helpful. In fact, there's a Pali word chanda, which usually distinguishes these two. So there's tanha, and that's in the dependent origination, tanha, and there's chanda, and they are used in very different contexts. And if you really get stuck, if you still don't quite believe that, if the fifth hindrance is still acting, you know, and there's still some niggling doubt, just remind yourself then you can fill this in. Well, maybe this is a desire that will get me to the end of desire. Okay? You know, just don't worry too much about it, in other words. But yeah, this is a healthy human being. Has this kind of aspiration to be rid of these things because it enables the human heart to expand, to deepen, to mature, and to become wise. And if that's the type of desire, okay, but there's a difference between that and an extra big piece of chocolate cake. And we all know that. Yeah. So just so I think aspiration is a useful.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Ajahn Pavaro, it looks like we don't have any more questions.
Okay. No more doubts?
I guess for today, no. For now, no.
So we'll just dwell basking in the fragrance and shade of these fig trees. Good. Okay. So that gives us half an hour or so for meditation. Is that right?
Yes, Ajahn Pavaro.
Okay. Good. And did you hear that?
No.
No. Yeah. Okay. That was the bell. That was a meditation bell. It doesn't really matter, but I think there's a setting that has something to do with music, and it Zoom sort of identifies continuous sound or something. Anyway,
Yes.
okay, so I won't, in other words, long story short, I won't try to end the session with the bell. I will resort to the age-old monastic habit of clearing my throat.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay, so yeah, just if you normally close your eyes, let's do so. Body is the first foundation of mindfulness. So recognizing this and just arranging the body in a useful way, making it comfortable. If possible, with an alert sort of spine, because that will conduce to an alert mind to some degree. But I recognize that some couches, some chairs don't really permit us to sit quite like that. So a couple of deep breaths after listening to some Dhamma and thinking about these terms and similes and hindrances and so forth, but just letting these things go for now. Take a deep breath, just relaxing, letting it go. So there's the feeling of the hands, maybe on your knees or on one another on your lap. And the hands have temperature, perhaps. Maybe you can feel one is cool. Maybe they're quite warm. Sometimes hands are kind of energized. There's a kind of energy that comes out the hands through the fingers, and so you might feel the charge. Just to note whatever you can note. Not trying to make the hands do anything, feel any way, but just observing them, giving attention to the hands. So breathing is continuing. Can move your attention to your abdomen or feeling of air passing through the nostrils or mouth. So attention is just this very simple thing, very natural, very normal. And largely unnoticed. But in this practice, we, as it were, give attention to attention. And when thoughts emerge, sensations seem to interrupt that awareness of the moment of breathing. Just recognize that this is a normal function of sensation and of our own particular habits. So the thoughts or sensations just arise and can be allowed to fall away. And the discipline of this practice, very gentle, is simply to allow that to occur, and then, as if by gravity, allow the attention to return to the focus, such as the breath.